2024 coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. But I do want to stay with football, with a big topic, with a major topic, as a matter of fact, that's kind of the bridge between the NFL and college football. Not sure how closely you've been paying attention, but over the last probably 3 weeks, there has been one guy whose name has been linked with basically every job that is open, period, end of story. And that's our old buddy Jim Harbaugh, the head coach of the University of Michigan. Oh, the rumors, they flowed like water through a river over the last month. Okay, bad analogy, but you get the point. He spoke with the Carolina Panthers. He interviewed with the Denver Broncos. He has ties to the Indianapolis Colts. Could the Houston Texans be interested? Who knows? I bring it all up to say the conversation has gone on for about 2-3 weeks since Michigan lost in the college football playoff, but I just want everybody driving now to take a deep breath because I have good news for you guys and girls. The long national nightmare is over. That is right. On Monday afternoon, Martin Luther King Day, shortly after we recorded the Monday Aaron Torres pod, we got clarification and notification from both the Michigan president and from Jim Harbaugh himself that he is coming back. This one, by the way, does feel official. Statements from both sides. I want to read each of them to you because I think they're interesting. First, from the Michigan school president, his name is Santa Ono, okay? He said, I just got off the phone with Coach Harbaugh, and Jim shared with me the great news that he is going to remain as the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. That is fantastic news that I've communicated to our athletic director, Ward Manuel, #GoBlue. A few minutes later, Jim Harbaugh releases his own statement. He says, I love the relationships that I have at Michigan, coaches, staff, families, administration, President Santa Ono, and especially the players and their families. My heart is at Michigan. I once heard a wise man say, don't try to out happy, go blue. So again, it does feel like for the winter of 2023, the Harbaugh rumors are officially over and he will be the Michigan football coach in 2023, at least for one more season. I bring it up to say I got a lot of thoughts, but what I will also say is there is really not one, but two things that make me think that we're actually going to have more Harbaugh rumors after next season. And that I really actually, there were two things that struck me about this week that make me believe that this really might be Jim Harbaugh's last season at Michigan. But you know what? We'll get to that in a minute. Before we do, though, let's just celebrate this. Jim Harbaugh is, in fact, we know, coming back to Michigan for at least one more year. And I'll be honest, I think it's a great thing for college football. Harbaugh, like him, hate him, whatever. He's a huge brand. Michigan is a huge brand. It's good for college football when Michigan is good, and it's good for college football when Jim Harbaugh is the coach of Michigan. So I think, if we take nothing else out of this, let's just enjoy Harbaugh for the next season. And I'll say this too. I actually do give Harbaugh credit because I think while only he can decide what is best for him, this feels like the right move at this moment for Jim Harbaugh. Now, again, Jim Harbaugh doesn't really care what Aaron Torres has to say. Jim Harbaugh doesn't know who it doesn't matter what I think. But when I look at the situation at Michigan, this felt like actually the worst possible time for Jim Harbaugh to leave Michigan. Not because he beat Ohio State for a second straight year, not because he won the Big Ten for a second straight year, not because he went to the college football playoff for a second straight year. The reason that this offseason, 2022 into 2023, made no sense is because 2023 is on paper, bar none, the best team that he will have had at Michigan with the best quarterback that he's had at Michigan. So it's crazy to me. Just think about if Harbaugh had left right now. For 9 years, we have been waiting. We've been saying Jim Harbaugh was this QB whisperer forever. And he could never find a quarterback in Michigan. He went through transfers, freshmen, this, that, could never find the guy. Fast forward, he has his guy with J.J. McCarthy. You can like J.J. McCarthy, dislike him, say he cost Michigan in the game against TCU. The bottom line is J.J. McCarthy also won them the Ohio State game. And so you look at this Michigan roster that is coming back. Why it made sense for Jim Harbaugh to come back for this specific season. It wasn't because you just won the Big Ten again. It wasn't because you own Ohio State for the last 2 years. It's because look at the roster that is coming back. J.J. McCarthy is the best quarterback that he's had. Blake Corum announced this week he's coming back alongside Donovan Edwards, 2 elite running backs. Your second leading wide receiver, Cornelius Johnson, announced on Monday after Harbaugh announced he's coming back. Cornelius Johnson announced that he is coming back for another year as well. You killed it in the portal. You already added 4 or 5 guys that could be day one starters next year, including a linebacker from Nebraska that many people think was maybe the best defensive player that entered the portal all offseason, a couple offensive linemen who could start for you. This team is loaded, and when you look at all of the surrounding parts, this is going to be Jim Harbaugh's best chance to win a national championship at Michigan, not only so far, but maybe ever going forward. Now, to be clear, that's not a knock on anybody else, and it's not to say that Georgia isn't or shouldn't be the favorite coming into next year. Just so there's no confusion, Georgia should be the favorite because even without Stetson Bennett, and we've talked about this, they return a ton of talent. They return, especially on the defensive side of the football, some real elite difference makers. Most of their defense was actually freshmen and sophomores this year. So Georgia should be the favorite. But you get past Georgia, look around. Alabama very likely is going to have two new coordinators as well as a new starting quarterback. We saw Jalen Milroe this year. I don't know if Jalen Milroe is the answer for Alabama at quarterback, meaning either they're going to play Ty Simpson, who basically has no meaningful snaps at quarterback, or they're going to have to go in the portal and find somebody. Ohio State will be breaking in a new quarterback. Kyle McCord, we think he's good. We don't know, though. CJ Stroud announced he's going to the NFL. Penn State, we think that Drew Allaire, the backup this year, is better than Sean Clifford, the 6-year senior that just departed, but we don't know. And so you look at how things are shaping up for Michigan next year, and I'll just tell you, Ohio State's got a new quarterback. Penn State's got a new quarterback. Georgia's got a new quarterback. Alabama's got a new quarterback and 2 new coordinators. Guess what? It is never going to look better on paper going into a season for Michigan. Oh, by the way, out-of-conference schedule is once again a total joke, and that's okay. It happens. We talked about this before. There's a reason the schedule is set up this way. They were supposed to have a home-and-home with UCLA. It got canceled. Well, now, here's your schedule. East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green at home, Rutgers in week 4 at home. Your first 4 games are at home. Then you go to Nebraska, to Minnesota. But again, you get Ohio State at home. The two marquee programs in your conference have a new quarterback. I'll say this, Wisconsin, I think, is going to be interesting next year. You don't play Wisconsin. So I could go on and on. But it's never going to line up nicer for Jim Harbaugh to make a real run at a title than it will next year. At the same time, and I know this is a day for celebration, there were 2 things that kind of came out over the last couple days that made me feel like this really might be it for Jim Harbaugh. This really might be, to use a bad pun, this might be Jim Harbaugh's last dance in 2023. And I know it's speculation, but call it informed speculation kind of mixed with kind of reading tea leaves. One, it seems pretty clear to me that Jim Harbaugh essentially has no relationship with his AD Ward Manuel, okay? Because let's go back and reread the statement from the school president, Santa Ono, who, of course, set up this contract extension with Jim Harbaugh. Santa Ono, in announcing Jim Harbaugh is coming back, this was his quote. "I just got off the phone with Coach Harbaugh, and Jim shared with me the great news that he is going to remain the head coach, remain the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. That is fantastic news that I have communicated to our athletic director, Ward Manuel. That I've communicated to our." So in other words, if we're reading the tea leaves right, and the rumors, and I've spoken to some people kind of that know some stuff that's going on at Michigan, this feels very much like a John Calipari, Mitch Barnhart situation. We talked about that last week. John Calipari and his AD are essentially not on speaking terms. My understanding is that Jim Harbaugh and his AD essentially are not on speaking terms either. Does it have to do with how things happened during that COVID year? Does it have to do with the pay reduction? Does it have to do with Ward Manuel demanding he make staff changes? I don't know, but what I do know is that after back-to-back Big Ten titles, Jim Harbaugh has all the leverage, and right now it does not feel like he is in a very good place with his AD. And so I was thinking about this when I saw this announcement. But remember when Jim Harbaugh got to Michigan, and kind of like the sentiment was when he got to Michigan, well, he'll be there 4 or 5 years, get this thing cleaned up and leave. Because everybody always says Harbaugh's tough to work with, man. Harbaugh wears on people. Harbaugh, after 3, 4, 5 years, you want him out. He wants to be out. And so you look at Ward Manuel now in year 7 with Jim Harbaugh, and I do wonder, not a very good relationship, clearly. Is that a sign of things potentially to come? And I understand if it really came down to Harbaugh versus the AD and Harbaugh's winning, they'd get rid of the AD. But to me, that's sign one. That's sign one that maybe Harbaugh isn't really built for the long term at Michigan. 2, and this is important as well. I was thinking about this and the process last year. If you remember, and we talked about it, but Jim Harbaugh went through the interview process with a number of different places in the NFL at this time last year as he really thought about his future in college football versus the NFL. He was linked to the Bears. He was linked to the Raiders. And we know that he went to Minnesota and interviewed with the Vikings on National Signing Day. And what stood out to me was that when Jim Harbaugh came back, when he announced he was coming back, he went through the process with the Vikings. The rumor was that he thought he was going to get an offer. The Vikings never gave him an offer, and he kind of had to come back with his tail between his legs. But why I bring it up is because shortly after that process, Jim Harbaugh, kind of in passing, he referenced that he planned after the Minnesota thing, he had an NFL itch, he scratched it, and that he planned on being at Michigan for the very foreseeable future. I looked up the quote. This was from March 9th. He said, ultimately, this was March 9th, 2022, last year after he interviewed with at least one NFL team, did not get the job, and was linked to many others. Jim Harbaugh said, ultimately, I decided this is where I want to be. And I have a lot of gratitude for that. And then there was no direct quote, but you read multiple articles, you can find them yourself. March 9th, 2022, he insinuated that he planned to retire at Michigan. Do you notice how he said no such thing in his statement that he was coming back on Monday? All he said was that I have relationships at Michigan. My heart is at Michigan. I once heard a wise man say, don't try to out happy, go blue. And so all of this is adding up to me that this very well could be Jim Harbaugh's last year. And if it is, that's okay. Let's enjoy it. Let's appreciate it. But also the other variable that I think is important to note here is one more thing. And then I promise we'll get to some hoops. The other thing that stands out to me, and I talked about it a few weeks ago when Harbaugh, this whole process first started. If you remember, what I said was, it seemed clear to me that Harbaugh wasn't waiting for a great job to get back in the NFL, that he wants back in, he wants to win a Super Bowl, whatever. And so we know that he spoke with the Broncos. We know that he at least spoke with the Carolina Panthers. It seemed very informal. He did an interview, I should mention, with the Broncos in addition to speaking with them. And so I only bring it up because if Harbaugh was seriously considering the Broncos, if he was seriously considering the Panthers, if he was seriously considering the Texans, those aren't very good jobs. Like, this is not getting the Bengals job with 10 more years of Joe Burrow or the Bills job with Josh Allen. These are pretty below average jobs. I guess the Broncos is okay if you think Russell Wilson can be rehabilitated, at least his talent. And so I keep going back to, if Jim Harbaugh wants to go back to the NFL for a mediocre job, then guess what? There's going to be mediocre jobs open next year as well. So something to think about, something to consider, something for us to continue to discuss into next year. We'll certainly talk about it in the fall. When Michigan season ends, I guarantee you within 48 hours, there's going to be Harbaugh rumors. It'll be interesting, but Jim Harbaugh is back for at least one.